G'day everyone, let me show you how to transform this image to make it more dramatic in Photoshop. My name is Hoy, and in this video, we'll learn how to turn this image to black and white, isolate the jacket, create a vignette around the image, and place a scratchy texture on top of it to give it a faded look. If you want to follow along, you can use the exact image that I'm using. The link is in the description. Okay, so to get started, let's open the file that we'll be using in this tutorial. Let's go to File, Open, navigate to the folder that you've got your image saved under, click on the image and press Open. The first thing I'll do is to unlock this layer by pressing this padlock here. We'll rename this layer 0 to something that we can recognize. I'm going to double click on this and then just type man and press Return. I'm going to make a duplicate of this layer by pressing Command J on the keyboard. It's always good to make a duplicate of your original image just in case you do something wrong with your image later on. In our case, in any event, we'll need a duplicate later on, and I'll tell you why a bit later. So the first step is to make a selection of the red jacket here. Now, there's many ways to make a selection. In this tutorial, we'll use the Object Selection tool. You can go up here. Now, if you don't see this icon here, you probably have one of these icons selected. If you do, simply press and hold on the mouse until these menu options fly out, and then just select Object Selection tool. Make sure you've got New Selection checked here. Our mode is rectangle. And what mode just means is that when we make a selection, we're going to use a rectangular marquee to make the selection. The other option is lasso, which basically means that you can make a freehand drawing of your selection. Now, there's no right or wrong. I'm just using the default of rectangle here. Over here, if you click down on this chevron, you'll see two options here, and this relates to how Adobe will make the selection. You can either have your own device make the selection, which will result in a quicker result, but may not necessarily be as accurate as the cloud option. The cloud option, which I've got checked here, is using Adobe's cloud to make the selection. Now, as you can see here, it will generally result in a more detailed selection, more accurate selection, but it may take a little bit longer to process that because it is using the cloud technology. But in our image here, I don't think it's going to make that much of an issue whether you have device or cloud selected. And that's because the red jacket has got a lot of contrast against the background. There's no competing color around the red jacket. So let's make a selection out of that by confirming I want to use the cloud. And I'm going to zoom in by pressing Option on my keyboard and scroll wheel mouse up. And I'm just going to make a selection of the red jacket by clicking somewhere here and then just dragging out a rectangle here. Photoshop's going to have a think about that. Now, the selection is rather good. You can see that through the marching ants here. However, if you notice that it's also included the inside of the hoodie, which is blue here, which we don't want. Now, if I can see properly here, there's also a little bit of blue here. I'm just going to scroll in a bit, zoom in a bit by pressing Option on my keyboard and scroll wheel mouse up. And yes, there is a little bit of blue here. Even though it's little, we can pretend it's not there, but we want to be professionals here, so we want to take that out as well. So there's two ways to subtract from your selection. One is using the subtract from selection option here, but I'm a keyboard shortcut person because that tends to increase the speed of my workflow. To use the keyboard shortcut, I'm going to move my cursor back near the area that I want to subtract. I'm going to hold down Option on my keyboard. Now, if I just move this cursor so you can see it a bit better, can you see the minus icon next to the crosshair? That signifies that you're now ready to subtract from your selection. I'm going to move a little bit closer here. I'm just going to make a tiny rectangle that just covers that area that I want to remove and let go of the keys. So now we have to do it again for this area here because we don't want this area to be selected. We're going to use the same technique. I'm going to start somewhere here. I'm going to press Option on my keyboard. That brings up the minus sign next to the cursor. I'm going to click and drag over the area that I want to remove. And then I'm going to release my buttons on the keyboard and mouse. Photoshop has already subtracted that from my selection. Now, if I zoom in here, just so you can get a closer look, these marching ants here signifies that there is additional selections here. If I scroll across by pressing spacebar on my keyboard and scrolling across, you see that there's also a selection here. We're going to remove that using another technique. For the time being, what I'm worried about is just these edges. I'm going to zoom out by pressing Command 0 on my keyboard to fit it to screen. And the next step is to make a mask out of this. So let's go to the mask layer icon here, click once, and you see that it's made a mask. But you notice that the image on the left here hasn't changed. So it seems like we haven't done anything. But the reason why it doesn't change is because there is an identical image right underneath this layer. So if I turn off this layer, you'll see the mask here. Now, before we go on, let's check the quality of the mask. We know already that somewhere around here, there are areas that we want to remove. You can barely see it here. To see it a bit more clearer, let's make a solid color behind that so we can identify it a bit easier. Let's go to our adjustment layer icon here, go up to solid color, and let's just choose any color that we like. What I suggest is choosing a color that contrasts against the image that you're trying to see clearer. So I'm going to pick this turquoise bluish hue here and then press OK. Let's move this layer beneath this image here so we can see it better. And now you can see a bit more clearer the areas that we need to remove here. Let's zoom in by pressing Option on our keyboard and scroll wheel mouse up. And to get rid of this, we need to paint it out. So let's make sure our mask is selected by clicking once here. Go to our brush tool all the way here, or alternatively, you can press B on your keyboard. That will give us our brush tool. Now with mask, black conceals and white reveals. And what that means is if we want to erase this area here, we need our foreground color to be black. At the moment, we have our background color as black. Let's switch it around by pressing this toggle button here, or you can press X on your keyboard. Now let's just make sure our brush size is appropriate. Now this for me is appropriate, and what you want is a brush size that is appropriate for what you're going to remove or paint in. So this is okay. If you need to resize your brush, there are several ways to do it. You can go up to the menu option here, clicking on this chevron here, and then adjusting the size by dragging this slider here, and then increasing the hardness all the way to 100. Make sure your opacity is at 100 and your flow is at 100. So let's just paint that out by clicking once here and then just dragging it along the line so you just remove it. If you've accidentally removed more than you should, and I'm going to simulate that by just rubbing this out, you can add that back by making white as your foreground color. Again, you can hit this toggle switch here or X on your keyboard and then just painting that back in. Now you've got to be careful about how much you paint back in, because as you can see, I'm painting back in some of the areas that I don't want. But I'm going to pretend I did that on purpose, and I'm going to show you how to be a bit more precise with your selection. With these areas here, the white and the blue, I have to mask that out. So with black as my foreground color, I'm going to press X on my keyboard to switch my background color, which is currently black, to the foreground. And I'm just going to paint that back out. I'm going to resize my brush by pressing Control, Option, left click, and then drag it to the left, and then continue painting. Now, you can repeat the process by painting in or out any areas that needs to be fixed. for this tutorial, I'm going to leave it here and move on to the next step. I'm going to fit my canvas to screen by pressing Command 0 on my keyboard. I don't need this blue solid color layer here anymore. That was purely just to see the quality of the mask. And now that we've fixed our mask, let's move it to the trash. And the next step is to bring back the background. And that's the reason why we made a duplicate of the original layer in the beginning. So let's turn on the visibility of the original layer here. Let's move this to the top by clicking and dragging it here. Now what we want to do with this layer is to turn it to black and white, except the red jacket. Let's go to our adjustment layer icon here and select black and white. Now we have two issues here. One is now the whole image is black and white, which basically negated all the hard work we did to mask the red jacket out, to make sure that the mask is perfect, etc. The other issue is that this black and white layer is affecting both these layers here. We only want it to affect this layer here. So to make sure that this black and white layer only affects this layer, we can clip it to this layer here. There are a number of ways we can clip it. We can go up to this clipping icon here. And what you see when you click on that is this down arrow here, which means that this effect here will only apply to this layer here. The other option is a keyboard shortcut. Now, if I just turn that off, with this layer selected, I can press Command Option G on my keyboard, and that does the same thing. And if two options wasn't enough, there is a third option which I'll explain to you. I'm just going to remove that clipping mask again and hover my mouse between these two layers somewhere here, hit Option on your keyboard, and your cursor will change into this cursor with a down arrow. Once I've got that icon, I'm going to click once on my mouse. Before we adjust the levels of black and white tones in this image, what I want to do is bring back the red jacket. Now we can make a mask again, but luckily we already have a mask here. The only issue is that it's the other way around, it's inverted. But that's not an issue because there's an easy way to invert a layer mask. Let's duplicate the mask first. So Option on my keyboard and click and drag it up to this layer here. Now, as I mentioned, the problem is that it's the other way around. We want everything black and white except for the red jacket here. So with my layer mask on this layer selected, I'm going to press Command I on my keyboard, and that will invert the layer mask. And you can see very quickly we've got the effect that we're after. But if I look very carefully, if I zoom in a bit, Option on my keyboard and scroll wheel mouse up, the two masks doesn't overlap each other, resulting in this tiny little gap in the two masks. So at a distance, it doesn't look like it's got a problem. And we can sort of fudge it and go, well, it's good enough. But we want to be professionals here. So what we're going to do is fix one of the masks. The mask that we're going to fix is this one here. Click on this mask here to activate it. I'm going to go back to the red jacket, zoom in, Option, and scroll wheel mouse up. I'm going to select my brush icon here, or B on my keyboard, and I'm going to paint in the effect, as in I'm going to expand the mask. So remember, white reveals, black conceals. Because I want to expand the mask, I want to reveal more of the mask. So I need to have white selected as my foreground color. At the moment, my foreground color is black and my background color is white. So let's just switch that, and let's just resize the size of my brush by pressing Control, Option, left click on the mouse, and then just dragging it right. Something like this would do. All I need is a size that will cover this gap here, and click and drag along the gap. And you can see it's erasing the gap because all I'm doing is expanding the mask. Now I can inspect the mask by zooming in, Option, and scroll wheel mouse up, and there you go. The gap in the mask has disappeared. You can pan around by pressing spacebar and dragging your mouse to inspect your mask, and that looks pretty good. I'm going to zoom out again by pressing Command 0 on my keyboard. And now let's take a moment to look at the black and white background. I'm going to press this black and white layer here, and I'm going to increase the size of my properties panel just so you can see it a bit more. And I want to explain what this is all about, all these colorful bars here. When I first learned about this black and white adjustment layer, I was so confused about why it had these colored bars. Because in my mind, it's black and white. Why do you need these colored bars? It just baffled me. That's why I want to take a minute to explain it to you. So if I just go back to the original image, so the original image is here. It's got different colors. It's got this orangey brownish color here. It's got some greenish tinge here, some greens here, some browns here, etc. So what these sliders are saying, where your original image have red, then it's going to make it darker in those areas that have red if I move the slider to the right. Now you can't see the effect here because I've just turned off the black and white layer. But if I turn it back on and I reset this, or I move it back to the right, you see here on the cap where it's got a bit of red. If I move it to the left, it's going to make it darker. If I move it to the right, it's going to make it lighter. So these colored bars represent the black and white scale were you to move it from left to right. So maybe you weren't even confused at all. Maybe it was me. But if you were wondering about why we had these colored bars in the black and white layers, hopefully that makes sense now. So I'm going to adjust these bars to get it to a level where I would like it. And the goal here is to make the colors around this person not to distract from the red jacket here. So I'm going to just make things lighter around him so then our eyes can focus on the red jacket. So I'm going to play around with these colored bars. And something like this looks good to me. Now there's no right or wrong in how much you move the sliders across. Now looking at this image, I think the saturation of the red jacket is a little bit too much. So I'm going to decrease the saturation of the red jacket. I'm going to decrease the size of my properties panel here. I'm going to select this layer here because I want the hue saturation adjustment layer on top of that. Let's go to our adjustment layer icon here and select hue saturation. I don't need to clip this hue saturation layer to this layer because there's nothing else beneath it. Now just a reminder, an adjustment layer will affect any layer below it. Now let's decrease the saturation by using this slider here. Let's just resize the properties panel again so you can see a little more of it. And then slide it to the left to decrease the saturation. As I'm sliding it, I'm just keeping watch on the red jacket here. So if I go all the way to the extreme, it's going to lose all its color, which obviously we don't want. We spend a lot of time masking it out. So I'm just going to pull it back a bit. Something like this looks good. Now the next thing we'll do is add a vignette to this. Now there's many ways to do a vignette. I'm going to do an easy way by using the gradient fill method. So I'm going to decrease my properties panel again by just moving this panel up. I'm going to click on this layer here because I'm going to create a new layer by pressing this icon here. I'm going to select my gradient tool here, or you can press G on the keyboard. Let's click on this bar here, and that will bring up the gradient editor. Just make sure that you've got basic selected and foreground to transparent selected, and press OK. Now let's change our color to black as our foreground, and let's reverse this and check the radial gradient option. I'm going to move my cursor somewhere around the middle and then click and drag it around here. Something like this. The further I go out, the more gradual the gradient will be. So something like this will do. I'm going to release my mouse and there you have the gradient. Now, if the gradient is too dark, you can always reduce your opacity by sliding this opacity slider to the left. I'm going just to change it to something like 75. And the final touch we'll make is just to add a texture on top of this. If I zoom in at the moment, it's quite clear. Obviously, it's a little bit blurry because of how the image was taken, but I want to add a texture to it to get that faded look. So in the description below, there is a link to the texture. Once you've downloaded it, press File and go to Place Embedded. And then select the texture layer, click on Place. I'm going to zoom out by pressing Command 0 on my keyboard. I'm going to move this, something like this, because I want it to go over the entire image. And I'm going to just drag this out so it covers everything. Once I'm happy with that, let's click on this check mark here. And you'll see the obvious issue here. After all the hard work we've done, we can't see anything except this layer here. But that's where blend modes come in. So at the moment, our blend mode is set to normal. Let's change the blend mode to something like overlay or soft light. You can choose any blend mode that you want, darken, multiply, etc. It just depends on the look that you're going for. I'm just going for a subtle look, which is why I'm going to choose something like overlay or soft light. Soft light is a bit more subtle than overlay, so I'm going to choose that. Now, I'm going to zoom in again by pressing Option on the keyboard, scroll with mouse up, and you can see the texture here. And even though I chose soft light, which is more subtle than overlay, it's still a bit stronger than what I wanted. So I'm going to reduce the opacity of that layer by just dragging it to the left here. Something like 50 will do. I'm going to fit this to screen again by pressing Command 0 on my keyboard. And there you have it. Doesn't that look good? Let's just review what we've done so far. I'm going to switch off all these layers and return it back to the original image. Going to disable this mask. If you wondered how I did that, I've just pressed Shift and clicked on the mask and that disables it. And if I click on it again, it enables it. So we started off with this original image. We created a mask here, and then we used the duplicate of the image by creating a black and white overlay over here. To make sure that the whole image wasn't black and white, we duplicated this mask here and then inverted it. After that, the saturation of the red jacket was a little bit too much for my liking, so we added a hue saturation adjustment layer here. Next, we added a vignette by using a radial gradient tool. And then just to get that faded look, we added a texture and setting the blend mode to soft light. We reduced the opacity to 50% just to make the effect a little more subtle. And that's how you can transform this image to a more dramatic picture in Photoshop. I hope you found this useful. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know what your favorite technique was or what you would like to see in future videos. Please like and subscribe and hit the bell icon so you can get notified for when the next video is out.